As APIs grow in scale and complexity, exploring endpoints, testing requests, and understanding integrations should feel effortless. That's why we've completely reimagined the API documentation experience in Document360. To get started, navigate to API documentation from the left navigation menu. Document360 supports multiple API specification formats, including OpenAPI 2.0, OpenAPI 3.0, OpenAPI 3.1, and Postman collections. There are multiple ways to import API documentation. To import an API spec, click New API. You can upload an API specification file, import an API specification from a URL, or automate documentation updates using a CI/CD pipeline. Let's begin by creating API documentation from a specification file. Click Upload API Definition and choose your spec file. The spec file is automatically analyzed and a structured API reference is generated. Before publishing, the specification is validated, and any warnings or issues that require attention are highlighted with a summary of the generated categories and articles. Click New API Reference and then click Publish to generate the API documentation. Within seconds, you have a complete API reference ready for your developers. You can also create API documentation directly from a hosted specification URL. Select Create from URL and enter the API specification URL. Document360 retrieves the specification, generates the API reference automatically, and organizes endpoints into a structured navigation experience. This approach is ideal when your API specification is already hosted and updated regularly. Whenever the original spec is modified, you can instantly sync the updates by clicking the Resync button. Now let's see how to modify existing API references and how the changes appear. In addition to the Resync option for URL-based spec files, you can modify an API spec by clicking Edit API Reference for both URL and file-based specifications. If the updated spec contains deleted endpoints, they are clearly identified and presented for review. The API reference is modified only after the deleted endpoints have been reviewed. Deleted endpoints are moved to the recycle bin, where they remain available for preview for 30 days. Document360 supports up to 3 levels of subcategories in the API documentation workspace. Categories are created based on the tag definitions in your spec file. Now, let's see how you can add articles and text within API references and modify them as needed. After the API reference is successfully imported, you can add articles in between endpoints and categories. You can also add content blocks within every endpoint using the mini advanced WYSIWYG editor. Let's look at the other options available for modifying and viewing API references. You can unpublish specific endpoint articles when needed. Published articles can also be edited. You can also rename endpoint articles and categories, download API references, and set access controls. For teams that frequently release updates, API documentation also supports CI/CD integration. Using the Document360 CLI package, you can automatically synchronize API specifications with your documentation whenever changes are deployed. Every API workspace supports multiple API references. Click New API to create additional references. Now let's see what the final API documentation experience looks like. The API documentation panel provides an interactive three-pane experience. On the left, you can navigate through endpoints organized by tags and categories and quickly search for a specific endpoint. The center displays the endpoint documentation, including its description, parameters, request body, authentication details, and schemas. On the right, you can view ready-to-use code samples and example responses. Code samples are available in popular languages such as Curl, Python, Java, JavaScript, and C#. With the Try It console, you can test endpoints directly from the documentation and view the live response, including the status, headers, timing, and response body. The response panel displays example responses for each status code. Session variables let developers store and reuse values such as IDs, tokens, and other parameters across multiple API requests, making it easier to test endpoints without repeatedly entering the same information. And with Eddy AI, developers can ask questions about an endpoint, authentication, or code examples without leaving the API reference. Document360 also supports multiple authentication methods, including API keys, basic authentication, bearer tokens, OAuth 2.0, and OpenID Connect. Before getting started, you can try out the API documentation experience using the sample PetStore API file. Whether developers are viewing schemas, reading responses, reviewing code samples, or testing APIs, the experience remains consistent throughout the documentation. Try API documentation in Document360 today. That is truly developer-friendly in every aspect.